Good morning. My name is Jeff Rogers, and I'm here to give you some background on, at least my perspective, on how technology is providing some opportunities for us in the field of medicine and healthcare, and where there's actually a need for collaboration and putting together what are effective models to help us achieve the innovations we need in healthcare. Okay, so I think that this recent crisis that has happened to us with the COVID pandemic is actually going to turn out to be something that is very helpful. So what I'm showing here are numbers from the US to try and make the point that when the COVID crisis initially hit us, and we took it hard initially, but this is showing March 1st when we declared a national emergency. You know, soon after that national emergency was declared, we began to basically close up shop. So the only care that was being provided, all elective surgeries were off. The only care that was being provided was either an emergency care or something that could easily switch to telemedicine. And so an example of that was behavioral support or mental health care, where counseling could be achieved by effectively doing telemedicine via a video conference. So that was an easy switch that was made, and that could continue more or less. But certainly for a while, we just basically tightened down to something that was emergency only. Over time, excuse me, that began to open up. But the fact that we made this big switch to telemedicine actually is sustained. And part of the reason that is sustained is because the government stepped in and actually provided two important things. Our Federal Communications Commission actually said, you know, we trust these communications, it's okay. And then our funding side actually said, what we call CMS, stepped in and said, you know what, we will pay for telemedicine and for people to actually check in on patients remotely, right? So that's a valid way to provide medicine. And so I wanted to show you a quick example where, you know, from about 10 years ago, where we did a couple of things that I thought were important that are relevant to today. And so one of them was rapid innovation. And the other part of it was the way it was structured. So in this case, you know, we had back when we were surging so many troops from NATO into Afghanistan, we had this challenge of we were seeing a lot of soldiers come back with mysterious injuries that were presenting like they had a concussion, right? So we were trying to understand what happened here. And, you know, there was a lot of debate on whether or not soldiers were getting hit in the head effectively. And that was what was leading to these injuries. But actually from the physics side of it, you know that that's not quite right. It can't just be that you got a concussion on the battlefield when a bomb went off. That's not a concussion-like event. So what we did is we tried to get a sensor system out there that could define whether or not this is somebody hitting their head or they're getting exposed to other things like overpressure, which is what happens in a bomb. Is that the mechanism? We need to understand that before we can begin to help them. And so what I'm showing you here is what we actually did. And so what we did here was we took that challenge, and instead of trying to create a whole new research arm to look into what's the best way to do the sensors, what's the best way to do everything, we actually looked at, all right, what can we do today using existing electronics, existing off-the-shelf parts? And so that led to us, you know, I had sketched out the original drawing, and then 14 months later, we had that thing, we had tested it, and we had given it to a group of special operations operators who took it directly from the US to Afghanistan and tested it in the field. And their testing revealed the problem, by the way, that we were able to turn a new solution on it within a month. And then we delivered it to 50,000 soldiers throughout Afghanistan and tracked them for 2 years. And what I'm showing you here is, you know, all the things that went into that, including, you know, developing the sensor, developing the protocol, all the analysis, the imaging that was done, connecting those together to come up with a criteria for, if you got exposed to this much, you're fine. It can happen over and over again, it's all right. If you're above this threshold, you got a problem, you gotta go see a doctor. And it turned out that the most important thing we did, besides getting that data, was just give the medics on the ground a green, yellow, red light based on these that let them say, hey, I got to worry about this person or not. It turned out to be a very valuable tool just for that purpose. And in the end, we got the data we needed. All right, so I want to use a different area to show how I think we can innovate in healthcare more effectively, right? So that area is actually the semiconductors, right? So I had made a mention that microsystems, there's been so much technological advance there, and we see how important those are and how actually even in something like automotive, the innovation that's going to be happening over the next several years in automotive is not in building engines. It's in how you incorporate electronics into the cars, right? That's really where the innovation is coming. And so, you know, if you go back to the 1980s and you look at it, the blue line here is showing you coming out of the 70s into the 80s, the proportion, the market share that was from the US in semiconductors. And semiconductors are a huge area, right? We're all familiar that right now there's a crisis in manufacturing cars related to, again, the lack of semiconductors, right? And so what we were seeing in the US was we had done a lot of the innovation, we had the majority of the market share, and we were losing that. At the same time, Japan was really replacing us, right? And so as the market share began to switch over, we had recognized early on in the US that there was a problem. You know, we were losing out from the innovation point of view, right? And so how are we losing this? Well, we tried to address that challenge because companies grouped together in the semiconductor space, and they funded universities to kind of go work on the next big things. But that didn't really change it much, right? That changed it some, but that's this boundary here. And so we continued to lose market share. Then what happened was when we recognized, okay, look, we got to do something different here. The government partnered with industry and with universities. And what we did was we launched something called Cimatech, where we took government level resources. So the government put in a lot more money. They helped make it not about a particular company's interest, but about a common set of interests amongst the companies, and then gave some guidance to universities, and that led to the International Roadmap on Semiconductors, and then provided to not just the guidance on what are the challenges we need addressed, but here's the funding to make it happen, and companies here, we're gonna have to share the IP out of this. And that actually made the difference. That was a really beneficial construction, and the US actually regained its leadership role and market share in that. And then that became kind of an international standard. And so I just want to show, you know, that was here, Cimatech in 1987, where we put industry, universities, and government together, led to the International Roadmap. That became the Focus Center Research Program. And I mean, look, something else, a really important lesson here is you have to have high level involvement from top leaders. So the person from the university side that really, from the industry side that helped create Focus Center Research Program was Craig Barrett, you know, the founder of Intel. So Craig personally was very involved in this. And in fact, in the meeting, the executive board meeting where he was retiring from Intel, you know, his one missive to everybody on the board from the government and industry and the university was, okay, we put this together, don't screw it up now, right? That was, Craig was very clear on, we've got the right mixture here of support, guidance, and innovative ideas. Don't screw it up, people. And so, you know, that's what we have continued today. And actually this week, the US government put $50 billion behind a new semiconductor effort. And it's exactly in this model, right? This model has worked well, and we're trying to continue it. Okay, so in the healthcare space, it's a very different problem, right? For the university, I mean, for semiconductors, the problem is how do we make the chips at lower cost with higher efficiency, right? And so that roadmap can be laid out. In healthcare, you have a different model, right? The care providers and the technology innovators are often a different set of people. And so what we really need here moving forward is the ability of the care providers to help define what needs to be done, and the technology innovators to actually make the innovations that are necessary to achieve those goals. So what has happened instead is, you know, if you go back now and look at it, back in the late 1990s, you know, we had all this hype about artificial intelligence and how it's going to change the world. And you know what? It worked somewhat well. It had promise at that time. And this is an example from detecting breast anomalies, right? And so, or tissue that you need to be concerned with in a breast. And so we've reached the point now where the AI has actually caught up to the point where it can, fulfill the promise that it had back then, and to the point where actually it can outperform clinicians, right? That's in a very narrow field. It's a specific thing, a routine thing that you're going to have to do all the time and get repeated consistency on. That's what a computer's good at. And now we've reached the point where that's actually achievable. And why I bring this up is because I think doing that, reaching that point where things like this are achievable from computers, is the reason why we need to really accelerate it now. We need to put together the right people to guide and set what the challenges are, the technological companies to get behind that and provide what they're good at, right? And also we need the guidance from governments around, all right, where are the innovations going to be used, right? How are we going to make this better for everybody as opposed to a certain hospital chain or a certain company, right? We want to make this something where we improve for everyone. And so I think an important part of that, and a place where we have seen a lot of interesting innovation, is around digital surgery. And so, that's something we're talking about here today, and we'll hear from Sergey Zook about an interesting case of that with cancer detection. And so the one I wanted to call out to you is a little bit different, and that is for detecting aneurysms and then actually helping the surgeon decide what size stent they're going to put in, and which one needs to be corrected when, by looking at the morphology of the aneurysm, how it's changed over time, and actually helping the surgeon define which piece of hardware they want to put in. So what I want to come back to here is, in this example, the company who developed this capability, they take, a scan of the person's arteries, and what they do is they look at changes in morphology over time, and then they help pick the right size device to put in so that the surgeon, when they go in there, they don't have the wrong size device and then have to keep the patient on the table for another half an hour while they throw away a device which costs several $1,000s and get another one made and then inserted, because there's a lot of risk there. And what's interesting here in this example was when the people developing this company put it together, they wanted to not only understand how to size it, but help the surgeon guide therapy, route plan how they're going to get in there and understand the fluid dynamics of the vessels. But when they presented that to the care providers after they had it all done, the doctors, the surgeons doing that said, look, I don't need any of that. All I really need you to tell me is which ones I need to operate on and what size device I need to put in there. So this company has now dropped actually all these other components and focused just on doing that. Let's understand the morphology. Let's understand what size device needs to go in. And that has been a successful business for them. And so they're doing quite well there. So that's really what I wanted to show. And I wanted to let you know that I think that we need to really look at here, what is the right innovation model? How do we put together the insights of the clinician with the technology innovations which now exist, and we need to really focus them? What's the roadmap for achieving these goals? And then we need the insight, the funding, the help to make it a common capability the government would provide. So, okay, I'd take any questions you have on the chat line. I'll answer those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jeff. Really interesting. You touched on a little bit at the end there. I think it's worth revisiting. And how does something go from being a really cool, innovative idea that's interesting and flashy to something that's actually clinically applied in real life? Who are the enablers of this? And as a country, what are the next steps in enabling that?
Right. So my opinion on that would be, I think the right people are the people on the ground providing care. So the clinicians, right? You really need to work with them and support them in the job they're doing. And so, from a technology point of view, and I think the aneurysm example is one where, okay, look, that they could see from their point of view that, oh, you want to understand how the blood flows and where you might have additional problems downstream, all that kind of stuff. And it really didn't matter to the people on the ground who have to take care of these. And the people developing the technology did not, in this case, understand well what they were trying to solve. And so I think that that's what really makes the difference. I mean, this sounds very ordinary, but it's really essential that you understand, who am I trying to support with this, right? And you're trying to support the doctors who are doing the surgery in that case, and what is really their problems, and listen to them tell you their problems. But the challenge then actually goes back to the doctors as well. The doctors need not to solve the technology problem in many cases. That isn't helping. I don't need someone in the medical field to tell me how to solve the numerical problem or how to do the AI. That part I've got. Okay, what I need to understand is, what is the challenge they're trying to face, and then let me bring in the tools I have. So I think the most important thing there is exactly that. What is the problem I'm trying to solve, right? And if I'm just trying to develop technology, just go develop technology. Don't pretend you're trying to solve this problem, right? So when you go to solve the problem, take the broad view of, what's out there, what really addresses this best. And then once you have something working, don't be afraid to scale it up and fail, right? Set a good goal for yourself, which is, I'm not going to hurt somebody with this, but this will really tell me if this is going to work or not. And then go after that as quickly as possible. Because I think, especially with the project, you got to fail. You're going to fail, accept it, but just make sure you put the right challenge out there, because when you come back from that first failure, you'll probably do it much better the next time around.
It's really interesting. Thank you very much. I don't know if anyone else has any other questions, but maybe in the interest of time, Jeff, we might keep moving on. And thank you very much. If there's anything you can pop in later on again, maybe.
Yep.